Hi everyone, welcome to the Lads in Lockdown final chapter. We have Mike, Dane, David and myself, Billy, just enjoying another little bit of talk about the Sabbath. And I will just get right into it because we don't have much time. So Dane, I have lots of Christian friends and many different denominations, but they observe the Sunday as the day of rest. Could you give me a little bit of an answer of why does the Seventh-day Adventist Church go against these principles that other churches observe?
Yeah, sure, Billy. I'd love to hop in there. For the record, I think I don't think it's the Adventist Church who went away from the other churches. It was actually the Adventist Church actually followed the Jewish tradition and were the original Sabbath keepers, and it was all the other churches went away from our tradition, if you will. But look, I mean, Adventists, I suppose, they recognise and we recognise the perpetuity of the Sabbath day, right? So from creation, it's apparent, and we in episode 1, check it out if you missed it, because we established there that in creation, it's very, very clear that the seventh day of the week is the day which God sanctified and which God set aside as being holy, right? And so the seventh day of the week is the Sabbath day, or is our Saturday, okay? And there's no evidence at any point in Scripture that this day, that this Sabbath day was changed from Saturday to Sunday, or from Saturday to any other day for that matter, right? And so, like, as we said in episode 1, Sabbath is lots of things, and one of the things it is it's a memorial of creation, right? And that's what is embedded literally into the fourth commandment is remember the Sabbath day, because it's the day when God created the heavens and the earth. And my mind goes to, like, if people think it's trivial and they can just change like the day to whatever they want, like I always ask them, well, what if we were to start observing something like Anzac Day on some other day, right? And how would you feel about that? Because of course, as we all know, as Australian and New Zealand residents, that the 25th of April marked the day when the Anzacs landed at Gallipoli, and it's got all this historical significance, and it was this day, and so we stop on that day to remember the start of this tradition. And so I think that although it's obviously an analogy, okay, it's a bit of a metaphor. It's not a one for one correlation, but you can understand the principle here that, if we're kind of not really comfortable with observing Anzac Day on any other day, or if we're not comfortable observing Christmas on another day, or whatever it is, then why would the Sabbath day be any different? Like, if God's told us to remember this day perpetually, then why would we change it? It just seems a little bit odd. But of course, it's important for us to remember that God is with us every day of the week, okay? Like, it's not as if God only rocks up on a Sabbath and then he hides. Like, God is with us every day of the week. But we need to remember, and as we've stressed on this podcast, that it's the Sabbath day that God has commanded a special blessing. And so he invites us to meet with him in a special way on this day. And it's actually a sign of our faith and a sign of our allegiance to him, okay? So the fact that it may seem a little bit trivial to some people just kind of emphasizes the fact that, if it is trivial, then you need to trust God. You need to put your faith in him. You need to obey what he says, and don't rely on your own understanding and your own judgment and your own reasoning. Just trust God and obey what God has said. And I think that's a representation of your allegiance and your obedience to him. So yeah, I think that gives a really brief overview on an Adventist perspective on why we keep the Sabbath.
So you're saying we should keep it because it's a special day, and therefore there's no real reason why we shouldn't change it if God has given us a command to be so special. So we should keep it that way. And following that, then I'm going to ask you, David, a question. So we have this movement of trying to change the day from the Saturday to the Sunday, and on March 7, 321 AD, Constantine decrees Sunday to be the day of rest. So can you give us a bit of insight of what factors led to this decision, and how this SDA agrees or disagrees with these factors?
Sure. I guess a good place to start would be, well, who was Constantine? Constantine was a Roman emperor who ruled between AD 306 and 337. His father was a Roman army officer who became deputy emperor in the West in AD 293. Constantine was acclaimed as emperor by the army after his father's death. He became sole ruler of the Eastern and Western empires in AD 324. Constantine was the first emperor to stop the persecution of Christians and to legitimize Christianity. This happened in 313 when he developed the Edict of Milan. Then in March 321 at the Council of Nicaea, which Constantine initiated, he issued the following decree. On the venerable day of the sun, that the magistrates and people residing in cities rest, and that all workshops be closed. There were many factors that led to this decree. Initially, both Jews and Gentiles participated in synagogue worship. On Saturday and then later in the evening participated in breaking of bread ceremonies as part of newly developing Christian rituals. This is where some distancing between Saturday and Sunday observance may have begun. Of course, Saturday evening for Jews was actually Sunday because the Jewish day runs from sunset to sunset. This Saturday-Sunday divide increased as more Gentiles joined the church, and their work responsibilities did not allow for seventh-day rest. Another factor was that while the Sabbath expectation was for a rest from labour and devotion to prayer, Sunday, or the Lord's Day as they call it, expectation was for joy and celebration of the resurrection and new creation. There was also the introduction of a Sabbath fast, which led to the Sabbath being looked upon as a gloomy and unenjoyable day. Further, a corresponding desire for the Christian church, who were also Sabbath keepers, there was this desire to distance them from the Jews and to avoid the associated bad press, led many Christian writers to exalt Sunday. So it should be noted that Constantine's decree of 321 was not the defining moment in the whole transition from Sabbath to Sunday. It was significant, but contrary to what you often hear, the transition did not occur then in its totality by any means. It was a gradual shift over centuries that included a complex multitude of factors, the decisions of many ecumenical church councils and the like. French historian Louis Duchesne put it this way: the observance of Sunday was at first supplemental to that of the Sabbath, but in proportion as the gulf between the church and the synagogue widened, the Sabbath became less and less important and ended at length in being entirely neglected. The Seventh-day Adventist Church would agree that these factors led to this decision by Constantine. However, it would not agree with the decree itself. One historian, Justo Gonzalez, found that no theological reason seems to have been compelled for this change. One might say it was more a matter of convenience.
No, very nice insights, David, in there. So we have some cultural reasoning. We also have some political reasoning, and some religious reasoning behind it. And it did evolve over time. You know, it wasn't just a one thing that happened straight away. So that leads us a little bit to the next question. So we established now that we have a divide on people that follow the Sabbath as the seventh day of rest, and other people see this Sunday, the Lord's Day. So Mike, how should Seventh-day Adventist people or believers see other people that have a different belief on the Sabbath Sunday issue? How the other denominations, how should we react to that as Seventh-day Adventist?
Yeah, very, very good question. I would start by saying that I think most Adventists would agree that this isn't actually a minor issue. It is actually an issue that contains some significance in our present day and end time significance in a prophetic perspective. So, witnessing regarding the reality of the biblical Sabbath should be encouraged, even to other Christians, I think, because their lives also can be greatly enriched by embracing this truth just as each one of ours have. Now, in saying that, there are several points I think that we need to be taking into consideration if we're going to be sharing the truth of the Sabbath with others. Number one, we really, really need to refrain from critical or negative attitudes. We may not agree with the practice of Sunday keeping, but being mean about it, being judgmental about it, that's not going to do anything for our cause. That only pushes people away. And in my early days as an Adventist, when I was very zealous but not very wise, I can attest that that's exactly what happens. I remember trying that method with my family, and let's just say it didn't go down very well. So we need to be a bit more mature than that and realize that not everyone has come to an understanding of that truth yet, and there are a variety of factors as to why that is. So we need to show people that we don't look down on them, just because their practice differs from ours. Another point I think that's really important is to actually focus on common ground, to not try to make the differences between our practices and somebody else's practices so prominent. If we want to actually have the opportunity to share with people, we need to be willing to build the relationship. And if we focus on the things that we have in common, the things that we agree on, you've got a far greater chance of that actually happening. And in the course of a developing relationship, those differences will naturally come to the fore, and then there'll be a more organic opportunity to actually witness, but it will be in an environment where there's acceptance and where you're far less likely to get a negative reaction. Finally, at the same time, just to kind of nuance that second point, I would also say don't be apologetic about your convictions. Don't be sorry about being a Sabbath keeper. You don't have to apologize for it. It's something as Adventists we firmly believe in, we should be proud of. And just as it's unattractive to shove your beliefs down someone else's throat, it's also unattractive to kind of hide it and pretend like you don't even believe these things. People aren't going to be attracted to either perspective that you take on that. So don't be apologetic. I think when people ask, what did you do in the weekend, you can say, hey, I went to church on Saturday, something like that. And that in itself will just casually mentioning it, not trying to hide it, but acknowledging it, that will also create opportunities to share with others. People will be curious because they don't do that. And they want to know, why do you do that? So I think we just need to take care. We need to show love and grace and acceptance towards other people, whether they're Christians or non-Christians, and just ask God to help us to have the wisdom to share the truths that He's given to us in a kind manner, in a loving manner, in a gracious manner, but in a way that by His grace will also be convincing as well. So that's what I would say to that.
I really, really loved your words of wisdom in there. Love. Isn't that what God is all about? Love. Love one another, respect each other, and treat others with the same respect that you will be willing to be shown to you. So to wrap up, we had this Sabbath as the day that it was instituted by God in the commandments, and He became our Redeemer. He gave us the law to redeem so we can find salvation after sin. Then Jesus highlighted the importance of the Sabbath throughout His life. He didn't put it aside. He even said on Matthew 24 that we should imply the sacredness of the Sabbath when He asked the disciples to pray not to be the Sabbath the day that you have to flee. And then we have the ramifications of the Sabbath. What is going to happen if we don't obey the Sabbath? And that is shown in Revelation 16. And that's, as Adventist Church, we have this, what we call the three angels message on Revelations 14, 6 to 12. And we will put it at the end on the credits where it says, look, this is what it's saying. What is the ramifications of not following God's commandments and whatever else. But yeah, it's been a really, really lovely time to get to know each other a little bit more and to be able to be here today discussing such a wonderful topic. So thank you very much, Mike, Dane, David, and until another time, thank you very much.